All right, this next section of the chapter, we're going to talk about the next series of theories on personality, and these are going to talk about more of the social cognitive perspectives on personality. So let's go ahead and jump into this here. So we can see generally some components of this social cognitive perspective. If we think about this too, right, we're looking at social components and cognitive components, but also how these two things come together. So we're going to see some general assumptions of this approach that people are aware. They note consequences of their behavior. So they're aware of their behavior, and they also observe how other people behave as well. And out of these observations of themselves and others, they form cognitions or thoughts or feelings on sort of themselves and others and how they're behaving. And so this perspective really kind of looks at this more holistic approach of observing behavior, observing different personalities, and sort of developing and adapting one's personality due to these different observations. And so there's three main psychologists we'll talk about in their perspectives and their additions to this social cognitive perspective. That's Albert Bandura, Julian Rotter, and Walter Mischel. And we'll kind of go through each of these in turn. So the first one is Albert Bandura, and his system really looked at this idea of self-regulation, or observing others and observing oneself and regulating your behaviors based on outcomes, essentially. And so first you might, as an observer, here, let me actually jump out of the way here. So first you might, as an observer, look and watch what someone else is doing, and you might see what their behaviors are accomplishing. So are they doing things that are having positive, successful consequences or outcomes? Well, then maybe you're going to imitate those behaviors. Are you observing a model and seeing negative outcomes, that they are performing things and that's not resulting in good results? Well, maybe you're not going to imitate those behaviors. And so you can observe someone else and learn from their outcomes to model and deliver your own behaviors. But you can also observe and model your own behaviors and outcomes as well. So without having to rely on observing someone else, you can see, based on what your own actions achieve, whether or not that gave you success in the past or not. And so if you see actions that derive in success, well, you're going to be more likely to put forth additional effort and mimic those actions again, because they worked well. Whereas if you saw less success from actions that you've performed in the past, you're going to be less likely to do them again going forward if you expect failure from them. So we can see this sort of as like, a simple example could be thinking about how we study for an exam. So if you studied in one particular way and you did really well on the exam, well, it's going to be more likely that you'll study that same way for the second exam because it worked well for you the first time. Whereas on the other hand, if you maybe you studied in a way and it didn't really work out well, you didn't do super well on the exam, well, then you're likely not going to perform those same actions. Or maybe you might even take away that didn't really work for you and you're not going to, really put forth a lot of effort to study because you expect you're not going to do well either way. And so in this example, specifically at least, I would certainly say potentially just try a different method or additional methods. But this is really the idea that, we're going to model what we do and we're going to see what is successful and what is not, and put forth more effort to mimic and continue successful behaviors and personality traits and aspects of ourselves kind of going forward. Then we have Julian Rotter's social learning perspective, and this really kind of comes down to this idea of locus of control. And so this is a big thing that kind of can make or break sort of how someone feels that they are able to control and have sort of sway over different things. And so locus of control can either be internal or external. And so internal locus of control is really saying that the events that took place or what happened to you was in your own control. So if you got a good grade on your exam, that was in your control. You felt like that was because you worked hard and you studied and you learned and knew the material, and you have that internal locus of control, that was due to your own actions that were in your own control. Whereas external locus of control are things that you view or associate as things being outside of your control. And so normally what we tend to see is that when we do well, when we see positive outcomes, we often associate those with more internal locus of control. And when negative things or bad things happen to us, we'll often be biased in associating those with external control. Now, that doesn't mean that those are actually true, but we have this bias to believe these things. So for example, again, if you did well on an exam, you might associate that as being due to your own efforts, your own internal locus of control, that you had control over performing well. Whereas if you do bad on an exam, you're going to be biased and more likely to think that that was more due to external factors outside of your control. So maybe that was because something came up and you weren't able to study and there was nothing you could do about that. Or maybe the exam was just structured in a way that didn't work well for you and that was out of your control. So we have this bias in how we associate things, but I think what's important to kind of understand and kind of use in this aspect is that when we do put things more in an internal locus of control perspective, we're able to sort of have more control over how we view the stressors and factors that are associated with this. Ideally, we want to strive, I think, to have or to view things with more internal locus of control, because a lot of the things, at least I always say, it's about perspective and how you sort of view sort of the situation. And I think that has a lot of influence on our stressors and our perspectives of how things are going. And again, external locus of control can be sort of this detrimental piece of personality and of success, in that it can lead to sort of maladaptive behavior or sort of learned helplessness in some senses, where you think it's out of your control, there's nothing you could have done, so why try anyways? And we know that that's not really the case most of the time. And so it's good to kind of keep this in mind and understand these two things are different and to strive for more internal locus of control.